Okay, so Maddalena, I think that you know Maddalena hardware now. Maybe Elisa, she will join us. She's here, but she will join us in November.
Really good. I'm here
as well. Okay, so Maddalena for me is probably the most important expert of quantitative storytelling in the world, because she was one.
We are five experts, so it's not that difficult.
Who invented this methodology, so I'm very excited to know more about quantitative storytelling. And she's working for Just to See, full time on Just to See. And yeah, this is just an introduction, because if you, this is part of our research methods seminars series, so probably this is the second one after Javier. And if you are, especially the PhD student, but also the postdoc, are interested in knowing more, feel free to contact Maddalena, because this is just the top of the iceberg. QST is much more than this, and I think it's a very powerful method, and Maddalena has been publishing in a top journal in the last few years, so this can be also a way to, to convince more quantitative people that our work is worth. Okay, so
thank you, Mario. Thanks for being here after these 2 intensive days, and I will try to give you some information about the theoretical foundations of QST and practical application. I will focus on 2 applications. So I will briefly say something about me, my background, the research question driving my research. The part 1 is about the theoretical foundation and the conceptual framework under the QST, and the part 2 is our example of QST in action. So what you should be expecting is that this approach is in the middle between qualitative and quantitative. So I will make it the quantitative part as simple as possible, although. And regarding my background, I got my PhD in Italy, in Naples, in an international PhD program named Environment, Resources and Sustainable Development. And but then I shifted to more qualitative approach in the last 5 years. And what I like very much is this definition given by Latour, so to hybrid ourselves, and in fact I want to escape this binary definition between qualitative and quantitative. I think that to have a meaningful quantitative analysis, we need to frame the problem, because otherwise we are remaining the same epistemic box. You will see more about this epistemic box. Why I have this hybrid profile in my research? These are my 2 mentors, and this is Professor Giadi, also present in another project. So my quantitative part, and this is my complex part, very complex. And Professor Giadi is a worldwide recognized researcher and professor in system thinking and environmental assessment. So within I had my PhD thesis on environmental assessment like life cycle assessment, energy analysis, and with Mario, another Mario, I had this mix between qualitative and quantitative. Mario is one of the top researchers in complex theory and multi-scale assessment. And this is a famous, matrix, Morpheus, when, and he used to be like this in the conferences, but also in the European Commission, saying to the officer, do you want the blue pills or the red pills? Saying that if you want to hear what you want to, or do you want some uncomfortable knowledge? So he invented this word like uncomfortable knowledge, no? Because we are bringing something in European Commission, but also in the quantitative assessment, some challenges. So what I like in the last year, so I passed from the algebra of prediction, so really rigid quantitative assessment, to the narrative of exploration, adding to my profile this part of qualitative exploration of framings. Especially, I really appreciate one of the critiques to the life cycle assessment was also reflecting one of my questions when I was doing quantitative assessment. No? Where are the peoples? Who wins and who loses? Because usually with the majority, I would say, of quantitative assessment, economic, but sometimes also hybrid environmental and economic assessment, you have these win-win framings. We can have everything at the same time. We can preserve the environment and we can have economy growing. Okay? And this is especially what I want to explore in Just to See. So to what extent the emergence of circularity ideas have elucidated for us a fundamental consequence, the depoliticization of the discourse on unsustainability of capitalism. So, and I have also this part related to science and technology studies on what do innovation and sustainability transition mean at larger scale, and what are the implications, trade-offs, challenges for society. So that's why I define my research at the moment a narrative of exploration. The theoretical foundation of my research, for sure, it's complexity theory. What is complexity theory? I will give you an example. I forgot to mention that I will be using to make the presentation more enjoyable, if I can. I will use some short videos that we've developed during a project. So what we are talking when we talk about complexity, we are talking about different meanings. So the same thing meaning different things to different actors involved. The uncertainty framing, especially the innovations and the future. When I talk about uncertainty, we have this fundamental distinction between, I don't know if you are aware, but known unknowns and unknown unknowns. The second one is really what I cannot predict anyway. And the first one is the one I will be focusing on the case study I will be presenting. So the plurality, the incomplete knowledge relating to uncertainty, and the system of server relations. So the same thing can really mean different things depending on who are watching it. An economist, an environmental expert, or a social scientist. And the impredicativity. The impredicativity relates to the fact that events are happening simultaneously and at different scale. So one thing or one analysis can make perfectly sense at one scale. Usually life cycle assessment makes sense, saying this power plant is less polluting than another at very power plant scale. But when you scale up the project or the impact, they have global implications that are not even considered. Okay? I will show you, and there is this nice paradox in the paper of Mandelbrot about fractals, and I will show you a video about this, which deals with what is complexity.
I mean, I have to change something, I guess. Yes, I mean. It's maybe the sound. Let's try and
See.
What makes the pattern
We need
you need more, I guess.
What makes the fact objective? While some things are harder to quantify than others, many would agree that an empirical measurement, such as the length of a material object, can be considered as another example of a fact that can be used to guide action. However, when dealing with complex systems, things aren't so simple. Take the case of the coastline of Britain. If we ask the captain of a large ship measuring the length of the coastline with a nautical chart, they will tell us that it is a certain length. Ask a bus driver, and they may give us a measure that is more than twice what the captain said. Who is right? The bus driver who measured the coastline based on their fuel consumption, or the captain using a nautical chart to predict the duration of their journey? If you ask a person who walks on the beach every day, they might tell you that the length of the coastline is not given, as it depends on the tide. This is to say, we can't measure the length of a complex object that has different meanings and identities across different scales. When we quantify something, we quantify a definition of that thing, and not the thing itself. This may all seem very abstract, but it is incredibly relevant for science advice and policy. Consider a complex sustainability challenge, such as the need to reduce emissions. Different actors, viewing the problem from different scales, will measure things differently and use different measurements to guide their actions. This doesn't mean that we should stop acting because there is no universal truth. What it means is that when providing scientific evidence to guide policy, for example, building targets or indicators, we have to also take into account which perspective is being considered, at what scale and for what purpose, and which perspectives are being left aside in the process.
And you will find much more videos on the Uncomfortable Knowledge platform that we have been creating during the Magic project. I will talk to you later. But mainly the main message is that when dealing with the complex system and wicked issues, so contested, we can have very different framings. And there is not a universal truth. This is also is echoing what we are in the past 2 days. Another theoretical foundation of my research is post-normal science. I don't know if you have ever heard about post-normal science. When you have a problem, you can have different types of problems depending on the uncertainty and depending on the decision stage. So the urgency also to take a decision. So if you have, for example, I don't know, to fix a desk, I will call a technician and it's done. But when so these are the branch of problems, of issues included in the normal science. So what I can fix, calling a technician, something that knows how to fix a desk. In the post-normal science, which includes all the problems which have a plurality of framings, different dimensions, social, environmental, economic dimension, are not problems or issues that can be fixed by one person. And we can have different views on that. I will show you again a video about this. This was the pioneers of post-normal science are Funtovich and Ravitz, two philosophers of science. And so the post-normal science have a real understanding why we are talking of post-normal science and non-normal science, It's of fundamental importance to understand quantitative storytelling.
Normal science was developed by the philosophers of science and Jerome Rabbits in the 1990s to offer a new approach for the use of science and policy on issues where facts are uncertain, values are in dispute, stakes are high, and decisions urgent. But why did we need a new approach to science policy? What was wrong with the normal way of doing science? Hello friends, welcome to our series on rethinking science for a complex world, and in this video we are going to talk about the concept of post-normal science. Have you ever wondered why is it that despite the fact that science has made so much progress in the last century, we still haven't come close to solving any of our global challenges? Take for example the issue of climate change. Climate science over the last few decades has generated enough consensus around the fact that there has been a significant increase in the Earth's surface temperature since the Industrial Revolution, that this increase in temperature is mostly caused by anthropogenic or human-induced factors, and that climate change is responsible for large-scale global environmental changes like sea level rise, melting of polar ice caps, increasing forest fire outbreaks, declining agricultural productivity, and increased instances of extreme weather events. So, despite this progress in the science of climate change, why have we not been able to take action to solve the problem? Well, this is partly because problems like climate change fall into the category of something called wicked problems, which means that there are multiple uncertainties in the system and there are multiple stakeholders involved with very different priorities and preferences, making these problems much more complex and difficult to address. Let's take a closer look at the problem of climate change. We know that greenhouse gas emissions.
So when we have a problem that have multiple stakes, multiple interests, and there are a large dose of uncertainty, and usually all the innovations or the future-oriented analysis have a large dose of uncertainty, we are talking about wicked problems, and so we cannot talk about a normal science, but it's a post-normal science, so having multiple dimensions and stakeholders. And we are going to see just the last part. I don't know why. So. It doesn't really matter. I think it's the type of video because for the previous one was better, no? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So why endow post-normal? So post-normal, this is the mantra of post-normal science. Post-normal science is when facts are uncertain, values in dispute, stakes high, and decisions are urgent. So all the plethora of issues about climate change, social and ecological system are of course in the field of post-normal science. The attention in post-normal science, which has different branches, qualitative and more in the philosophy of science, the attention is to the production and use of scientific evidence. So the plausibility of a policy, the plausibility of a framing, and this is important to recognize, and this is in common also with the complex theory, the recognitions of the role of values and perception in framing the problem and desired outcomes.
Okay.
And this is also another concept that we very much use about these known unknowns and unknown knowns, the socially constructed ignorance. To know, to have some knowledge about something, we need to live out something else. So the knowledge is always a part of socially constructed ignorance. And also another point is to challenge the hegemony of reductionist science through the extended peer review. So there is also a big branch of post-normal science in the co-production of knowledge and the participatory process. The part that I like more about post-normal science is the concept of critical reflexivity. So, to have always a critical approach in framing problems, both from qualitative point of view and quantitative point of view, and also the ethics of care in approaching a problem, no? So, practicing the ethics of care to avoid speaking truth to the power. This is a very powerful concept in science for governance. So the focus of post-normal science is the paradigm shift to the importance of quality in science for governance. And to do this, we need to leave the Cartesian dream of prediction, certainty, and control. So in such problems, like post-normal problems, we cannot have models, and you can have the more detailed models that you can, but you are leaving out something. So we have to acknowledge that there is a lot of uncertainty, and we need to learn how to deal with uncertainty. I think this was also the main lesson we got from pandemic. The last one, I mean, the most one of my recent interest in research is about science and technology studies. So, and in particular, I'm interested in the approach of Sheila Yazanov. You might know her. And Sheila Yazanov proposed she's a philosopher of science, and she proposed this approach when we deal with, especially innovations, an approach called technology of humility. So we need to be humble. We have to take this narrative of exploration when taking problems, and we need to leave the technology of hubris. We can not know anything, and we can catch the opportunity to use research to explore the contradiction and the trade-offs of innovations. So I'm really interested in this aspect of science and technology studies. So the benefits and opportunities and risks and trade-offs related to technology and innovations, and also the threats and the risk for democracy, environmental sustainability, and human values. If you have time, really go to read these two papers. These are the really clarifying and inspiring for me about the humility in the Anthropocene. Okay, this is the premise of my work in the past 5 years. The premise of the work is that till the Industrial Revolution we don't have any fossil energy, so the population was low, and the hectares, the land available per capita was very high. You can have it here in green. The human population was low, and then the consumption of energy was very low. So we basically were a circular society. I mean, circulating everything, and but with the industrial revolutions, we had this trend: an overpopulation, the high consumption of energy in red, and the land available per person decreased a lot. So this is the entering of fossil energy with the Industrial Revolution. So we basically moved to linearization. So what we were doing manually, with the Industrial Revolution, machines substituted people, humans, in doing stuff, which was better in a way, but we moved to linearization. So also the overpopulation, the production of waste increased, of course. These are, so what mean, this is the paradox of our analysis. So modern technical progress meant using oil to save land and labor. And we want to again come back to this, presuming that we can maintain our standard of living. So the circular economy idea is exactly the opposite, using land and labor to save oil. Also the organic farming and so on requires a lot of labor to preserve the oil. So these are some, and how we are going to do it also together with the circular economy, also with alternative energy. Alternative energy will come somehow, and there is a funny video about American presidents that since 70 they are repeating that we will have the renewable revolution and everything will be fixed in 5 years. So I could not find this video, but it's almost the same. So in the last 5 years I focused on two topics, the energy transition and the circular economy transition. And within this project, this project was called Moving Towards Adaptive Governance in Complexity, informing Nexus security. I always need to read it because I don't remember. And we remain humble, just calling the project Magic. The main concept of Magic was exactly to trying to relate qualitative perception with quantitative part. And we try, and this methodological approach is called, so the engine of Magic is the quantitative storytelling. And this was applied to 5 policies case studies and 5 innovation case studies, with the aim of increasing the understanding of the opportunities and limitation of new technologies and policies. I still cannot believe it that as in just to see, the European Commission gave us money to challenge them. But anyway, was like that, no? Because we were like going to the European Commission. I mean, our stakeholder engagement was with the European Commission, and trying to have a qualitative check on the narratives, on the mainstream narratives in the European Commission. The project was about the Nexus, so the water, energy, food Nexus, and the aim was this one Nexus.
We are told that we are living in a post-truth world, where actual facts are no longer significant or relevant. But the statement is misleading. There is nothing wrong with the world we are living in. The problem is that we are no longer capable of understanding it, because we are using old narratives and analytical tools that were developed in the past to explain a world that no longer exists. In the academic world, if possible, the situation is even worse. Scientists still believe that they can control and model nature and the process going on in the biosphere using the equation proposed by Newton. The concept of Nexus is becoming very popular in relation to this point because it reflects the fact that there is an elephant in the room that nobody wants to see. The Nexus, in short, indicates that 1, we have a problem in terms of sustainability, 2, science cannot handle it properly, and 3, that we do not have an adequate institution of governance for dealing with it. In this course, we will become familiar with the ideas of
this comes from a trailer of Moot Court.
You will learn to see your community or your country as a complex social and ecological system and how to describe its water, energy, and food metabolic. How much does your society depend on fossil energy? And how much is it externalizing environmental problems to other societies and other existence? Can we have a global shift to renewable energy and organic agriculture? We will provide you the tools to answer this question, looking at the elements of the nexus with a novel and fresh approach. This way, your analysis will be magnificent to inform decision-making, assess policy, and impact.
This was our research group in Magic, and this was the trailer of the MOOC we developed during the. So we had this big consortium formed by different universities with different expertise, both in qualitative and quantitative skills. For example, we had the University of Twente, the inventors of water footprint, and Wageningen James Institute is expert in qualitative assessment, and also the Joint Research Center. University of Bergen is a university especially with a department on philosophy of science, where Fontowitz was based, the pioneer of post-normal science. And what is magic? The magic of magic. So what proposed Magic project is to have a post-normal approach, so a way to frame the narratives in the European community and check the plausibility of these mainstream narratives. How we did it with the quantitative storytelling. I have also, one of the last slides would be a self-reflection that we are putting in a recent paper. So quantitative storytelling is a protocol for quality control in science for policies. So it aims to bring these two sides together, qualitative and quantitative, especially to check policies and innovation. You maybe already know what is a narrative. A narrative is a story, how we make sense of the reality around us. For example, the example here is this is a very simple example of narrative. So to move to a low carbon economy, we should improve energy efficiency and reduce energy consumption by 20%. This is a narrative. And okay, so it's based on post-normal science, and we were about to explore different narratives depending on the storytellers, and especially we were interested in the link between problem framing and the generation of scientific evidence. So we applied this protocol, the quantitative storytelling protocol, to 5 directives, the water framework directives, the habitat directives, energy directives, circular economy, and CAP, and to 5 different innovation: fracking, electric vehicles, biofuels, desalination, and green bonds. I was involved in circular economy, energy, electric vehicles, and biofuels, so more into energy and circular economy side. But what is the quantitative storytelling? The quantitative storytelling departs from the fact that there are several perceptions. So starts with a step on the text and discourse analysis on directives or innovations. You will see that in one of my case study on biofuel, I did a media analysis on biofuel. And then the second step was to engage with the EU and members of the European Commissions by means of interviews and focus group. So these were the steps to really understand the framings within the European Commission, and then we agreed on the aspect to be explored. You will see some example before. So we have this part about perception, qualitative, and this part below, more quantitative part, not necessary I will talk briefly about MuSIASEM. MuSIASEM is the quantitative engine of quantitative storytelling. So you will check the plausibility of the narratives that we collected from European Commission, and then discussing outputs with extended peer community. So this is another post-normal inspired concept. So the first quantitative storytelling iteration is stakeholder mapping, so identify stakeholder within the European Commission, interviews, text analysis on documents, interviews with technical staff and different DGs. And then we have a second iteration with the policymakers and a third iteration with the policymaker, but also other stakeholders with the extended peer community. When we talk about quantitative storytelling, we are talking, I want to be clear on what quantitative storytelling is and what is not. It's not a model. It's not like closed. We used to say that this is semantically open approach, meaning that depends on what you want to check. You will find different indicators. So you have not deterministic indicators in all the analysis. With the quantitative storytelling, we check why a given policy innovation is needed, so the why, the justification narrative, but also the plausibility of a given policy. So why, for example, why do we need, and you will see later, why do we need biofuel, although in 20 years, in more than 20 years, they failed to address the issue of climate change. So this will be one of the questions I will try to answer later. And then the plausibility of a certain policy, normative narrative, what type of policy or innovation should be implemented. This was the case of electric vehicles, and the question in the case of electric vehicles was, are we really sure that with the electric vehicles we are solving the transportation problems? And so the quantitative engine of quantitative storytelling is called MuSIASEM, and it mainly addresses what we were saying before about the complex theory. So we have different scales at the same time. So the acronym of MuSIASEM is multi-scale integrated analysis of societal and ecosystem metabolism. So the analogy is with metabolism. You know, if you say David consumes 2,000 calories per day, okay, and you will compare with Bryce, but if we don't know which kind of activity they do, how the internal organs function, we cannot compare anything, because we are comparing apple with something else, okay? With cheese. You want to be the cheese. And okay. So again, MuSIASEM is not a model, although we have been told we were creating a model, but it's not, because it has this big part of semantic insight. So the analogy is with metabolism. So when we're talking about MuSIASEM, we are talking about societal metabolism. So you have the whole body having a certain metabolism, but without looking at the single organs, you cannot really compare anything. And this is the same for a nation, no? We cannot say, and you will see later, we cannot compare Italy with Germany, saying, okay, Germany is consuming more energy, Italy less. So, but they are different, they have different organs. Germany has a big industrial parks, and Italy is not, has not. So we cannot compare two different things without going through the different scales at all level and different levels below. There are 4 concepts in MuSIASEM, which is the quantitative part of the quantitative storytelling, and I think this could be, concept where we can have a discussion. In MuSIASEM we have 4 dimensions to be checked. The feasibility, what does it mean? The compatibility with the environmental constraints. So for example, do I have enough natural resources to run a process? So it's very biophysical. The viability is the compatibility with the socioeconomic constraints. Do I have enough money? Do I have a workforce? Okay, so this is related to biosphere and ecological processes. This is related to human sphere, so everything which is under human control. Desirability checks the compatibility with the desired value. So although something could be feasible and viable, could be not desirable. So the local community, for example, doesn't want a power plant close to the house. Although I have the natural resources and I have the money to do it. And the third concept is about the openness of the process. Why related to the inputs? When we are importing the resources, we are indirectly importing, for example, we are importing oil, but we are not only importing energy, we are importing the workforce needed to extract the oil. So we are not investing our workforce in Italy, for example, because we are importing oil from Middle East or whatever, or gas from Russia, but indirectly we are also importing, outsourcing, exceeding the limits that we have in our country. We are indirectly importing the workforce needed to produce the oil, the energy, the resources. We are not investing ours, but we are indirectly importing from abroad. So these are examples of feasibility, viability, and desirability check. In the feasibility check, we ask if do we have enough water, where the water is coming from, do we have enough land, etc. In the viability check, in the MuSIASEM, we ask if we have enough workforce, if we have the technology to do it, and in the desirability check, if this change, this transition, this technology is desirable. So the people are here. And what are the social implications, societal and social implications of all this? Something to be said about one of the applications of MuSIASEM, I think would be interesting. One of the aspects of MuSIASEM is that besides having, among the indicators, MuSIASEM also have hours as indicators used as a quantitative measure. Why hours are important? Because and why we don't use person? You know, some economic analysis have person. They consider, for example, energy consumption per person. Okay? Why in the MuSIASEM is different? And we count the hour. Because of course, if I say China is consuming a certain quantity of energy per person, but I'm not catching the difference between the fact that in China they work 14 hours per day, and in Italy we work 8 hours per day, for example. So having the hours as what we call a MuSIASEM fund had to have also the societal implication of all this into the to have societal indicators. Also, when yesterday, I remember, Giacomo was talking about the fact that not always the working labor and non-working labor are accounted in models and so on. In MuSIASEM, we have also this dimension. So there are no people, but there are hours of working or reproduction work. So it's interesting, for example, the data. One of the indicators of MuSIASEM is that in China we have a ratio 1 hour of paid work out of 5 hours. In Italy we have 1 hour of paid work out of 13. This means that, what does it mean? That in China we have most of the hours in the production sectors. In Italy or in Europe in general, we have most of the hours outside. And of course the productivity is very low. In US, you have machine doing, you have industrial agroecology, agroindustry, so you produce a lot. Of course with a lot of pesticides, fertilizer, and so on. So this kind of indicators are also included in MuSIASEM, and of course you can draw attention to social, environmental, and geographical justice saying this, no? Instead, if you have indicators like based on person, you lose some information. For example, that we in Europe and in China, they work the double. Okay? Okay, I will go briefly to example of quantitative storytelling in action, and especially challenging energy policies and innovations like biofuels, and I will briefly reflect on the application of quantitative storytelling, meaning that was not linear in some way. What is this? This is the main narrative regarding energy in the European Commission, saying, so the main narrative was with energy efficiency, so by improving power plants and fixing electric bubbles and so on, we can reduce the consumption of energy. So this was how this narrative, mainstream narrative, was built by doing text analysis on policy documents and interviews with the policies officer. So the question that we were raising at this point was, are we producing robust evidence-based science, so quantitative accounting, to assess energy efficiency? Does these indicators of energy consumption make sense at all? And it's not, you will see. Spoiler. I will show this video about energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency is one of the European Union's top priorities. By increasing efficiency, the EU hopes to achieve a secure and renewable energy supply, reducing emissions, saving costs, and encouraging economic competitiveness. To make sure energy efficiency improves, the EU has set efficiency targets for different years, relying on indicators to monitor improvements. The use of indicators is where the situation becomes tricky. To visualize the problem, let's imagine that we have 3 different households and that we want to identify which one is more efficient. The first one is a large, modern home filled with efficient appliances owned by a young, urban and rich couple. In the second case, there is a single retired person living in a tiny apartment. In the third household, there is a medium-sized apartment shared by 6 people who use old appliances with a bad efficiency performance. The first big household is more efficient in terms of appliances and per square meter, but consumes more energy per day than the second one. The third house, running on old appliances, isn't efficient on the technological level and consumes more energy per day, but it consumes less energy per capita than the other 2. The real issue, then, is to frame the question of why we want to measure efficiency in the first place. This example shows that the choice of an indicator isn't just a technical question. Indicators used to to push for more efficient appliances will be favoured by the industry, while indicators linked to energy poverty or socio-environmental justice will be favoured by social movements. Depending on the actor and on the concern, one or another social practice can be framed as being the most efficient. Which indicators do you think we should use if we want to save energy?
So this is just to frame the discussion we are going to have. To check the plausibility of energy efficiency indicators, we compared the metabolism of Europe and China when, in terms of energy consumption, and of course, as I told you, in the metabolism we are going to check other levels below the national one, because of course they are functioning in different ways. So in China, while in Europe the investment in clean tech decreased, in China the investment rose a lot, almost I think more than doubled in China, and this is so the question was, can we compare different socio-ecological systems, or are we comparing something which is completely different? And you will see that this is the case. So this is an animation about, this is an indicators of energy per hour, and this is our hours in the paintwork. So people working but transformed into hours. And what do you think that these indicators means? Energy per hour of work. It means the same that productivity. For example, if you are consuming more energy per hour of working, it means that you are doing more with the machine. I mean, you have a lot of infrastructure. So it's an indicator of the level of capitalization of paid work. And this is China, which you see that grows a lot, and Europe staying in the same place in almost 15 years, from 2000 to 2016. So this means that China grows a lot, as we see in this. So developing is in the adolescent phase, while Europe, with the analogy with metabolism, is in the elderly phase. But so the adolescent China is building up the capital in terms of infrastructure and a lot of investment, while the elderly Europe is adjusting to local conditions. So it's not increasing the level of investment. But we are growing, so how do we do it? This is the question. How do we do it without investing a lot in the capitalization? By
Growing what? What do you mean growing?
in terms of economic activities. Yeah. How do we do it in any case without investing? China, okay, is building up the capital, but Europe is more or less remaining there.
It was more financial.
It's financial, but also the fact
Outsourcing.
this other narrative, the externalization narrative. So we are mainly not producing anything, but importing everything. So we have other people, and this has to is directly linked to question issues on environmental justice and geopolitical implications. So, for example, this is Europe and this is China. You can see that in terms of hours of working, so how we evaluate the hours. when I when I told you that when we import something, we are also indirectly importing the hours needed to produce that resource. For example, if I'm buying a t-shirt, I'm buying, I don't know, 1 hour to produce this t-shirt. This is exactly the same. So what does this graph mean? That in China, the yellow bar, they produce everything domestically. So while in Europe, almost half of the resources and then also the working hours to produce those resources are indirectly imported. So embodied in imports. So that's why we are growing. And but China is not only producing to sustain China itself, but also to breastfeed the Europe. So favorable terms in terms of trade can externalize energy consumption and emission away from industrial sector. So we are mainly dismissing our industrial sector. We have all the working hours in services. That's why we have a nice standard of living, and externalizing the production sector, the industrial sector outside our borders. So this means virtually expanding the carrying capacity of our production sectors. Yes, and this is a more detailed analysis about each country. I don't know if we don't have anybody from Netherlands, but anyway, you are from Netherlands. Yeah, because Netherlands is the one externalizing more. I mean, it's not producing anything because it has no lands, no big power plants, but it's importing everything. I mean, in reality, Netherlands import raw materials and process them. That's why it's in the top in terms of production of biofuels, because in the statistics you have like Netherlands in the top 3 producers of biofuel, but in reality they process biofuel, but all the raw materials, the plants, are coming from southeastern countries, Latin America. So Netherlands is one example of making profit out of this externalization of resources. Yes, just to conclude on this example, which was more quantitative. So please ask me if something was not clear. Post-industrial society, like in Europe, can use and control more energy than the industrial one did previously by consuming energy both directly and indirectly. This is also a graph because the same concept, you may know the concept of carbon leakage, right, or not? Oh. Okay, meaning the same, no? For example, when there is the narrative that by using electric vehicles we are not polluting. No, we are not polluting our city, but we are polluting where the electricity is made by using carbon and so on. So we are just outsourcing or dislocating emission far from us. Yes.
So this is basically about re-embedding all the cost of production in the
I mean, the real cost of maintaining our lifestyles, not in terms of economic cost. I'm not talking about economic cost, but environmental cost.
Is that just a way of basically like challenging this idea where you measure the cost, environmental cost,
exactly,
where the place is produced rather than where the place is consumed?
Yeah, exactly. But also challenging the narrative that just measuring, just having an indicators of energy efficiency, you cannot compare two countries, because one country like China can be the adolescent. I mean, producing for the country itself, but also to export, and Europe, which is elderly, which is not producing anything, and importing everything.
I have a question. Sorry. No, it's because now like it's making more sense. Like one of the things you said in a previous slide where you were comparing like China and the was it the
Euro.
The euro.
You mean this one? This or
the previous that one? And you were saying.
Yeah.
No,
This one.
No, the previous one. The one where it's two flat lines.
This one. Yes. This is what we are. Is the hours invested into the local production, and is the hours that we are indirectly importing by importing resources. And this is the comparison with China, which instead the yellow line is almost everything. So they are producing everything. That's why all the emissions are high.
Yeah.
We cannot blame China, who is producing for China itself and for us.
So what you basically are doing with this method is that you take a narrative
Yes.
that tends to frame a problem resolution in a certain way, right? Like for example, how we can keep growing, combining economic growth with environment, and then you deconstruct, not only using our tools, which is discourse analysis, highlighting tension point in the discourse, but also like combining and using quantitative measurements to deconstruct a specific narrative and to compare with other narratives. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, the second example is more on the discourse analysis. Because you can have different way of applying quantitative storytelling. That's why I'm saying this is not a strict protocol. And instead, in different case studies, we realized that we used a completely different approach. I mean, always you have this part of definition of narrative, and then trying to challenge the narrative. Or open the space to alternative narratives.
And this is when narratives are fact-based, which is...
Or directive-based, I mean, imaginaries. They really do, that's why I'm suggesting you to read Yasanov, who talks about technological imaginaries. I mean, what I think that it will happen in the future. I think that one narrative could be electric vehicles will save the transportation system and we can make rid of oil. Okay? So in the first phase, always we have these two phases, the semantic phase, defining the perception, and the quantitative phase. But we have case studies in which this was more quantitative. The second one I'm presenting briefly is more qualitative about biofuels. Because the question around biofuels was biofuel policies and innovation is in place since 20-30 years. But nothing happened in reality. So there was a lot of controversies about biofuels because of the competition with food, for example. And the answer of academia to this was proposing very complicated and detailed models, when the problem is not this, and we will see. I mean, this is more quality. I can skip the video. But we frame biofuels as two, with a double definition. The first one is that biofuels as technology. You know, biofuel is usually made from plants, and you can have a sort of diesel, you can have a different generation of biofuel. The first one was made with food-based plants, crops. The second one and the third one are advanced biofuel because they are made from byproducts and waste. But the second definition, the most interesting in this paper and this quantitative storytelling, is that biofuel is a promise which was renewed every time that there was a fail. I will show you why. We the idea about biofuels being in place in 20-30 years can be done from the policy making around biofuel. So we have 5-6 different directives, always renewing and changing the targets and the goals. And we analyzed the narratives in this case having a purely qualitative approach based on sociology of expectation. Sociology of expectation tells that in innovation you have the expectation doing exactly like this curve. So you have at the very beginning a peak of expectation, and then you have a phase of disillusionment. And but in the case of biofuel, we have more phases doing that. You will see. So the question of these papers was, why do some solutions persist even as they have persistently failed once materialized? Even though biofuels were proved many times that they were not working, they are still in place in the policy arena. So the methodological approach here was completely different. There was a discourse analysis on media. The media were the articles were taken from Euroactiv, which is the European media platform for the online publication of articles. And we analyzed almost 200 articles with the content analysis, identifying actors and change of expectation over time. So you see that this is much more, in the time frame of more or less 20 years. That was when the policy making about biofuel started. This is the breakdown of articles over the 20 years. So what were the expectations? These are like a screenshot of the articles popped up in the analysis. And we reconstructed, we traced back the history of expectation around biofuel. So the first expectation, so the first phase of expectation around biofuel was at the beginning of year 2000, when biofuel were expected to create new market outlet for agro-industry. So there was a CAP reform in 2003, setting a subsidies for per hectare. So if you want to plant a crop to produce biofuel, you will get 45 euros per hectare. So there was this peak into the expectation about biofuel, and the biofuel directive saying that we had to reach 6% of transport fossil fuels by 2010. This never happened because in the 2007 we have the first phase of disillusionment of the food crisis. So we had an incredible increase of the price of key food commodities for the competition between food and biofuels. So people, especially in Bangladesh, were starting for the subsidies to crop biofuels instead of food commodities. And so this was the first phase of disillusionment of biofuels. And also in the 2008, two big studies on the fact that maybe biofuel was not that good even for greenhouse gases were published. So we are in a phase of disillusionment. So the article will basically saying that converting forests and grassland to produce crops for biofuels was producing even more greenhouse gases emission, because you were cutting old plants to plant little new plants that have a capacity of absorbing biofuel which is very low. Okay? And so the next types, and this is interesting because every time something in biofuel policy doesn't work, the promise, that's why we define it as biofuel also as promise, the promise is renewed, no? There is always a next generation that will accomplish the goal. So, although all the critics around biofuel in the 2007 and 2008, in the end we have another renewable energy directive pushing for more biofuel to be produced, to be injected into the market. Why? Because of course the industry, because of the boosting of the economic industrial lobbies. Agro-industry, so big agro-industrial companies producing pesticides and Monsanto, for example, which were taking advantages of the hype of the biofuel, pushed European Commission to have again biofuel into a renewed hype. Subsequently, there were several again critiques to biofuels. The European Commission, a report from European Commission revealed that biofuel do not contribute to the desired reduction of greenhouse gases emission. So the solution also was not, okay, biofuel is not going to work, but was to put a cap on the production of biofuel from crops-based biofuels. So to have to propose as a solution the next generation of biofuels made by byproducts and waste. And so again in 2016 the first generation biofuel, so the crop-based one, was accounted for the vast majority of subsidies. In 2018 there was a new directive. What was interesting, again Netherlands, it's not something no, but because Netherlands is on the top country producing, in theory, producing biofuel, but it is in reality processing. So there was a cap on the use. There was a cap on the use of first generation biofuel, so crop-based biofuel. So all the European countries agreed that we are not going to use first generation biofuel, but we are going to use waste-based biofuel, mainly from cooking oil. You know, the oil that we used to fry, and but the fantastic articles that was that Netherlands was importing fraudulent cooking oil biodiesel from Asia. So importing, consuming using oil. So importing cooking oil using sheep, ferries, and sheep, but this cooking oil in reality was palm oil. So it was a fraud.
Palm oil.
Yes, it was not allowed, the palm oil. So it was discovered that in reality what Netherlands was importing was not cooking oil from the eastern part of Asia, but in reality was palm oil which was not permitted.
I don't understand why you have to import a fuel using another fuel.
This is the first point. And no, and also you cannot have so much cooking oil to produce enough biofuel to substitute to substitute the
This happens because European Union is
subsidizing.
okay. So it's the economics of nonsense.
Yes, economics of promises. So, just to conclude, and we in fact in our paper define biofuels as the zombie technology, which will live forever, although it dies sometimes. Several cycles, what we found by means of media analysis, were several cycles of heights and disappointment in the biofuel history. And what was interesting is that in the face of disappointment, the promise of solving the problems was, okay, we failed, but the next generation will solve it. So this was the interesting, the most interesting point of this. And this is just to say that this is one of the last papers we were published with my colleague on science, technology, and human values, this was the initial ideas of quantitative storytelling, but in reality it was something much more complex than a circle like this. I mean, and mainly in the quantitative storytelling you can have, we reflected on the fact that we have been used two different approaches. One was falsifying, the one that I just showed you, no? I'm falsifying something that is framed as a narrative that will save the world. Okay? So the approach in these two case studies was falsifying the indicators, so falsifying the narrative. And another approach of quantitative storytelling, which was used in the case of electric vehicles, was given the uncertainty affecting this innovation, we will open up the discourse and try to learn and understanding better what are the trade-off of this. And for example, this approach is the one that I'm going to better apply to just to see. So really understand what are the trade-off of this transition. Nothing. This was from our paper that I always love to end my presentation with this sentence from Gramsci, that the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interjourney, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Just to reflect on the fact that if we don't think about a radical change in the system, we are still in the epistemic box. Huh? Basta.
Oh, this was a lot of things. I don't know, we have questions or... I have one basic comment.
Yes.
I grasp more or less what is the main rationale and the main techniques. So basically you have this, on one level you have a narrative analysis, and the idea is to deconstruct, debunk, if you like, narrative, not only using traditional tools like discourse analysis, but also complementing this with data. And I think it's very important, especially when you want to discuss with people like Kike Vasquez, no? With people who are used to only appreciate quantitative data. And in this sense, I think it's very useful. My question is, how do you use post-normal science and quantitative storytelling to create alternatives?
Yeah, and so was the last slide. I mean, the case study that I showed you, the energy analysis and the biofuel, were approaching the narrative by falsifying them. This is true. But in other case studies, like in the electric vehicles, the approach was much more post-normal, in a sense that we have been conducting much more focus group to construct, together with the people, alternative narratives. Like, do you say, okay, do we really need electric vehicles? or do we want, this was an alternative narrative in many of the focus groups we conducted in the electric vehicles. No, we want a more livable city, not necessarily electric vehicles. So there is a part of the quantitative storytelling which can be used to falsify, and another one to create alternative. For example, was also challenging the idea of electric vehicles because you are remaining the same paradigm of being alone. One, you know, that the occupation rate of the average of the occupation rate in Europe is 1 person 0.2 per car. So even in the shift to electric cars, you are remaining in the private property paradigm. So this is to open up the dialogue to construct a
And I see many links with other ideas like responsible innovation, cooperation, and democracy. Because one of the central aspects of Prospera, for example, how we can create organizations that are working on the principle of horizontal and more directive forms of democracy and so on. And post-normal science is also about opening up the box of science to other alternative epistemologies. That is also one of the topics of the session that we had in Coimbra. No? Okay, and no.
Okay, thank you so much. Very interesting. My question goes a bit away from what Mario just said. For me, I really like the concept of this narrative debunking and these sort of things. It's just that I come from an ecological economics background, so everything that you said, of course, for me is no news. That this all doesn't work. So my question is more towards like the beginning of your presentation, when you talk more about the philosophy of science and, for example, also the concept of complexity. In that work, when you build these I know you don't like them to be called models, but when you build the approach or whatever.
It's more an epistemology.
When you, how do I phrase this? When you engage with the concept of complexity, did you come across or did you engage with social systems theory, where we basically say, okay, social systems or our societal structures, we build structures to be actually able to deal with complexity of the real worlds, and the problem is that we basically build structures that make us deal with this complexity in one way that makes us then very hard for us to adapt to a different complexity or to act differently. And basically that we arrive at this paradox where through our structures in our society we need to deal with a new complexity, but it's paradoxical because we create structures to basically ignore complexity. So have you come across this? Have you dealt with this idea of embracing complexity and uncertainty?
Exactly. I mean, the point was exactly this. I mean, you can maybe solve complicated things, but you cannot solve complicated. I mean, you can try, and in this way, I think was one of the way, but there are more. To deal with complexity. I mean, with the fact that facts are uncertain, so we cannot foresee a future, or we can decide together to propose alternative narrative, but we cannot say this is the way to. So I think this was the main message.
That was a very important point that is very much at the center of the discussion around technology and technology studies, which is the fact that our society and capitalism works on the illusion of control. We are in charge. And yesterday I was saying that circular economy is by definition a managerial, not theory, managerial device. No? And just accepting that we don't have to refuse or reduce always uncertainty because we can't, or just accepting that we have to embrace the uncertainty. It's a declaration of it's a call for being humble. No? So I'm going to produce a new technology, let's be humble. Let's include other people that possibly are against it, and let's listen to their voices, because this will be probably useful in the future if something bad happens. No? This is
To me,
simplistic way to talk about.
to me it's exactly, let's use this uncertainty to understand better the challenges and the trade-offs.
No.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And I think the Netherlands is like a really good example of,
Sorry?
I think the Netherlands is a great example of what you're saying. Also, for me, I have to think about agriculture. We're the second biggest exporter of agriculture products, or flowers, such things. But I was wondering, well, I don't really know how to frame this question, but when we speak about countries, it can also be a way for corporations to hide, because it's the value chain. It's like how do you say, situating your activities in certain places and then shaping your narrative to perhaps influence policy so that you can do the extractive things you want to do that makes these things happen. So I was wondering if you're doing any work, or you know of work that's kind of challenging the narratives that companies, multinationals are using in different places.
I mean, you mean that the narratives can be different depending on the country? I mean, sure, but in this case was, the challenge was based on the mainstream narrative on the institution of policymakers in the European Commission. That's why we have this distinction between countries, the member states. That's why. Yeah, but we have also cases of applying quantitative storytelling to, for example, slums in Brazil, in Africa. Then the contexts are completely different, of course. So, yeah, I can give you some.
Javier, Alejandro, and John.
Okay, so before I ask my question, I wanted to say thank you very much, because you clearly have a converted version, and I think the methodology has so much potential. I was very particularly impressed with the premises of Posl-normal science, which fit very much with my understanding, and that comes from STS.
Yeah.
But I have a question, because that wasn't clear in the presentation. Okay, so not sure like what it is that I didn't understand.
No problem.
But to me, and again, like the answer to my question might be we don't have time to deal with that, because one of the premises is urgency. Okay?
Yeah.
And I get that. So if that is the answer, I'm happy with that answer. But to me, like I see a problem here, because although it talks about facts being contested, I didn't see that the approach of the quantitative analysis is such that the facts are contested. It looks like the facts of others are contested, but my facts are not.
No. But the last part. But you're right. I mean, the time of the project as usual. You have the limited time with the but we have this last phase of open to be contested. So going back to the policymaker, but also to the extended peer community to have this open discussion. So post-normal science, one of the pillars of the post-normal science is to open the discussion to the extended peer community. But it's true that in this presentation was not highlighted enough this aspect of going back and trying to redefine our framing, common framing.
Can I comment on this? Maybe it would be a good idea to call Silvio Puntovic and give a workshop about post-normal science, just to clarify. And he's a great speaker, he's a very nice person. Post-normal science doesn't mean that you use numbers to criticize other numbers, or you use your facts to criticize other facts. It means that first it recognizes complexity, and it's a recognition that the way you frame a problem is actually functional to the solution and instrumental to a specific solution. So it's very important to reframe the problem. right? And then through the other facts or other numbers, other indicators are just a way in which you can reformulate the problems or present different perspectives to the problem. So it's not replacing facts with other facts, it's done better.
No, we are not going to say we are
you can replace a fact with different perspective of the same facts. And eventually what Maddalena is saying is that then you come back and you ask other people.
Yeah, it's iterative.
That's why I asked, because to me, like, it didn't come across like that, but I'm sure, like,
No,
maybe
one
I
of
missed
the-
something, or that's why I asked the question.
No, and it's very. I mean, in the end, was very open-ended as a approach. I mean, we talked about this, but in the end, there were, and it's true that post-normal science have different branches. One branch is very numerical, the NUSAP, so more quantitative on sensitivity analysis, and could be more prescriptive, I would say. But another branch is about co-production of knowledge, understanding the community, and then another one's more in the philosophy of science. Let's understand what we can learn more, and why something not working and was promised to be working. So there are different branches. It's very heterogeneous.
I'm just, one that there is a point that not for me is not very clear, maybe it's not very convincing, is the fact of the urgency. How the post-normal science will act in urgent situation, like climate change, or what you have to do if there is any invasion.
No, but with climate change, that's the whole point, right? That we don't use technocratic forces to, like, this concept of urgency actually, and finding like a very urgent solution to a problem that's been going on with the climate crisis for over 500 years through colonialism is actually a very also settler mindset that we can find a solution or multiple solutions in a short time. Actually.
But urgency can be also used for authoritative terms. Ecofascism. You say, okay, now we have to, or change engineering. We have to fix climate change. Let's impose everybody a cap on consumption. So we decide who is going to consume and what.
Because it's your
that's problem.
Because of the urgency.
It's
so
like
that's my problem with not my problem. The details that I don't really understand about post-normal science. But I think you have a good point. I mean, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much. I was really expecting this presentation. I was really clear. May I just have two specific questions? So joining what Mario said, there are other cases where, when looking at different possibilities, you think about the different types of organizations, for example, how different types of organizations could shape what happened, for example. There are,
Sorry?
When you are doing the example of the house that you show, right? Do you have examples where you think how the outcomes could be when seeing different kinds of organizations, for example, for transport? In one case, you can have a multinational company that takes the public money to reindustrialize the car manufactory. The second one, I don't know, could be the state. The third one could be, I don't know, socialize the society.
You mean which organization we try to include in the analysis?
The question is that are there cases? Or
yes, there are other cases. For example, in the electric vehicles case, we also involved trade unions, association of citizens, because in the case of transportation, it is really imagining how do you want a city to be. So the question is another, no? Instead of narrowing the question, do you want this binary question, do you want electric vehicles or not? No, this is not the question. How do you imagine your city being? And you see that citizens imagine a completely different stuff. Imagine parks area where there are no cars.
And this is what Richard opened online.
Yes.
I don't know who was in the online chat with Richard. He said innovation is not about ecology. Innovation is about imagining the society which you want to live.
Yeah, these are the type of alternative narratives that we wanted to explore in some cases. Especially we did it in the desalination case because it was a very local case in South Spain, in Canarias, pardon. The desalination, so there was more this attempt of imagining alternatives to only technology futures, and in the case of electric vehicles, because as to deal with how we live the city, how we want to be a city to be.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem.
depends on the level of the innovation. So you are sorry.
That's an problematica, for example, the European Union with the circular economy, they expect the companies to do the stuff. So already when you expect the companies, well, you have the car company that will decide how transport is shaped. So there is no discussion. So
exactly.
We don't really know we know individually what we want.
Yeah, we had this Nexus exercise in different cities and also at the European level with a big conference of the European cities and regions, so also citizens, mayors and so on. This exercise of co-production of knowledge where people were drawing the city that they want. So it's an exercise and try to go outside the box that we have been imposed somehow.
And the second question I have, but it's just curiosity. Maybe it's not, you don't know how, but in the graphic that where you compare the hours in Europe and in China, how do they calculate it?
You calculate
So
by...
it's really difficult, not to calculate.
Yes, depending on what you import. I mean, you know that, for example, to extract oil, there is 3 hours of human labor is needed. And then you scale up by multiplying the oil that you import. And you have different products and different resources that you import. That's why. That's how. Yes. Any other curiosities?
Can you share with us some literature and the slides so that they can have like a clear idea? Of
Yeah, I think a part of the literature is already embedded also in the presentation.
So they can have a clear idea of how to implement in practice the methodology. No?
For the quantitative part, I suppose you work in teams, right? There is no way a single researcher will be applying. It's also it also comes not only with a different methodology, but also with another way of working and thinking about research, I suppose. Like,
yes, as well. Yeah, and that's why Magic was a fertile soil to do this, because we had social scientists and biophysical scientists, and the real challenge was talking the same language, setting a dictionary.
I suppose my question was like, does it come, your reflection on methodology, does it come with a reflection on how to make these interdisciplinary engagements, how to facilitate them? Do you have like some tips for that? Or is more like something you learn as you
Yeah, but
go?
Here we have engineers, quantitative economists, people from humanities, so this is a clear example of how
We haven't tried to do something like that yet. I suppose to me is whether you like have any specific tips for
The first one,
learn as you go And
No. The first one is, don't think that it's a linear process. And it's not linear and you have to iterate a lot. I mean, also we do interview, we do text analysis, interviews, and then quantitative and indicative. No. So at the beginning was like, fantastic approach and we are going to do it. No. And then you have policymakers that don't want to have any critique or comfortable knowledge to be there. So, or don't want to be interviewed. So, I think the first thing is dealing with the uncertainties of being in contact with another sphere of knowledge. I mean, at least was for me. I mean, coming from quantitative, being was a very a practice of self-reflexivity for me. Because I was partially in the Cartesian dream of prediction and control.
We all are to an extent. It's difficult to change.
Yeah, but I think it's a personal also exercise to deal with the uncertainty.
Okay. Question. Maddalena will be around this afternoon, so feel free to